All right. So I think we
Well,
should share with our our devoted listeners that
thanks for listening.
thanks for listening. We recorded that we actually did this episode already and did not hit record.
We didn't record that.
This is our second time. So and it's a shame because I would say the last one was Chef's Kiss. We are hoping we bring the energy on this one, but
Yeah, yes, you'll have to take our word for it, but it was some of our best work.
it was our best work. So we're back days later.
We
Um,
are. We've recuperated. We're ready to talk about it in the same way again.
yes, the show must go on.
That's right. So, episode one is the first book of Taylor, and now episode two is the Book of Belonging. I don't think I've ever noticed that, but they named the episode after Taylor, so it was very clear that she was the lead in the show from the get-go.
So they start off this episode. Taylor was charged with aggravated assault, and she received 3 years probation.
That's right. In episode two, this is 11 months later.
11 months.
11 months after the first episode. Let's see what's changed.
She's with child.
She is with child. So she starts off sort of saying, like, I'm back. I'm really like reflecting on what's coming after scandal, miscarriage, arrest, and
Mhm.
pregnant again. 8 months along, I think she says. She's 8 months pregnant. Yeah. So very pregnant at this point
Yeah.
with Dakota's child, Dakota and Taylor making a baby.
Yep, they kept their relationship going even after the charges. And she said something like, "We decided to keep going and we wanted to be together." But it was not without problems, it seems.
That's right. So at the beginning of the episode, she's sort of like in her car because she's going to meet up with her mom and go shopping for like baby shower stuff. To which her mom replies, "You don't have anything yet?" And Taylor says, "I wanted to see what I get for the baby shower before I buy a bunch of stuff," which I thought was totally reasonable. Also, it should be mentioned Taylor's mom has really experienced a glow up since
Oh,
episode
wow.
one. She's looking good.
Looking great, ready
She,
for the camera.
that's
Lights,
right.
camera, action.
She's like, "I'm going to be on TV." I actually don't know what is different. She's looking good.
I don't like to speculate on work done, but it does seem like maybe she at the very least, I think she got like maybe a spray tan, but um it does seem like there's a difference, which I get if I filmed a pilot and then however many months later they're like, we are rolling again. I would be like, all right, let's see what I can do.
Heck
Camera
yeah. I'd
ready.
be I'd be working on my abs or something probably.
Yeah, buying new clothes. I don't know.
Yeah. So then meanwhile there's a little outdoor meeting with Macy, what's her name? And Whitney.
Wait, who's the other one? Is it Kayla? I don't remember who the other one.
Kayla. Kayla?
Michaela.
Michaela. Yes. I like Michaela, but I will say she's sort of like she's like um this sounds derogatory. She's like B-list in the cast.
No, but I actually think in reality television, at least on like the Bravo shows, they like the Real Housewives, for example, or even like Southern Charm, maybe, and that might not mean anything to you, but I think they have A cast members and B cast members. And the A cast members, you learn more about their background, their story. I think they get paid more. They have more responsibilities, though. Like they are expected to show more. B cast is like they're supplemental. And so I do think like I don't think that's derogatory. I don't know if that is what they do on the show, but I know it exists on other reality TV shows.
I mean, it's clear again, Taylor had an episode named after her, so she's A-list for sure when it
A-list.
comes to, yeah, what's going on. But Whitney also gets a lot of attention in the episode, or in the series, I should say. And then there is Macy, who is very quickly becoming my favorite cast member.
We like her. We like
Uh-huh.
Macy.
Yeah, I didn't think I would. Honestly, when I've gone back and watched the first episode after watching the whole series, I was like, this is something's different. So like there's a few changes, and I don't know how much is production and how much is 11 months and how much is learning, but it's a
Who
different
do
show.
Who did you think you would like the first episode?
Oh, I didn't think I would like anyone. The fact that I like anyone at all is the surprise.
That's what I was thinking.
And it's true. I mean, it is true. I'm very like
It's just not your jam.
I have my biases against certain presentations, and they're all sort of buying into this like over glammed kind of, which I'm sure like on social media is actually the norm, but I'm just like I just see like plastic, you know. So that's my bias that started off. So, you know, as I get to know them, I'm kind of breaking through that myself.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, and so they're together and they are wondering if the group will survive the scandal and what else can they take? Can they handle any more scandal after this assault, arrest, and charges? And do they want to separate themselves from Taylor given the
Right.
circumstances?
Right. So I think it's worth saying in episode one, Whitney is, you know, I could quote her as saying, I will do anything to keep Mom Talk together. Episode two starts with, these brands aren't going to work with us. Like Taylor's gone too far, which granted, when she said that in episode one, Taylor had not been arrested for assault. And so, you know, Whitney, I think, is feeling differently about the liability that Taylor maybe has become on Mom Talk. And she starts planting her little seeds, or at least she starts revealing her intent by just sort of like, you know, bringing that up. They talk a little bit about like, I can't believe she's pregnant. And Macy's like, I can. I am not shocked that she is pregnant again.
And they are losing money. Did they say that at this part? They're losing money on certain deals or as a
They, I
result?
mean, Whitney's saying that it has a negative image and brands aren't going to want to work with us and that brand deals have gone down. So I do think it's affecting their finances. And they're in business. They're all the primary breadwinners of their home and, you know, it is a business. So, you know, it's I think it's a fair conversation.
It is interesting to me, and I have to remember that their, obviously a big part of the show is their religious faith and what um how they want to live their lives in a way that's congruent with their faith, which would maybe then suggest that having a baby out of wedlock is not
Hmm.
the ideal situation. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I hadn't thought about that being particularly difficult, but if a lot of their fan base are LDS women, then that could impact them. Sure.
Even though it seemed like half of them have, but um, I mean,
But
you know,
they've repented. It's fine.
another episode, yes. But but it is sort of funny to me to hear them say, like, well, after the arrest and like the assault charges, do we just need to separate her? And like Taylor is like about to give birth. Like she is out to here. She is not, she has sort of, which I know we're going to talk about. There's been, I think, a lot of growth, but I just like when you think about the chaos, because I think we talked about this last episode, and I think many people would agree that there was a lot of chaos going on in Taylor's life and the decisions that she was making. But then she got pregnant, and I imagine all of that calmed down. And so then to still be like, do we want to associate? She's out there getting arrested. It's like she's 8 months pregnant now, and like I don't think anything has happened. I think but also maybe if maybe they were also considering, I don't know, the pregnancy and they're not married and
Sure.
all that factored in. That's all I'm
Sure.
saying.
Yeah. They talk about how I guess Whitney is the other kind of head-ish one or in competition for being the head. And I guess it comes down to social media clout, right? Like who has the most social media clout does have more power in the group, I'm assuming. And so it does seem from this that Whitney has a lot of power and that Taylor is the other person who has a lot of power. Is that true?
I think that they use the term like queen bee. Who's the queen bee? And I don't know how again, I don't know how this works in their world on social media, but it looks, and I probably need to honestly go and watch more of their individual videos, but so it seems like they all must go around and take turns changing it up based on who is like in the center talking. So the person who was
Mm,
going to post that on their site, or on their social media profile, they are in turn the center and everyone's around them. And I think they change it up a lot. And so they must do like a few. So I'm like, well, if that's the case, how do you decide who the queen bee is? Maybe the majority of, like, who has the majority of the followers, who gets the most money and brand deals. That is that how they decide what is the queen bee title? But that is what there does seem to be this pull with Taylor and Whitney. And I think someone says it's their personality. They both have like really strong personalities.
mm.
And so that's why it feels a little contentious. But it seems to be maybe more on Whitney's side, maybe.
It certainly seems, yeah, highlighted in this one that that's the case. Yeah, that's super interesting. It's funny. It's just occurring to me that the people listening to this and watching this are probably way more informed. Like if you care about this, you probably know what's going on. So
Yes, no.
I hope you enjoy our speculation. That's not like we don't know what's happening outside of the
Fast
show.
forward 10 seconds.
Well, all right. So Whitney's talking about how brand deals that go down. This is already where, she's like, we're holding on by a thread, and Macy's sort of agreeing. It's like Taylor, she makes the comparison. She's like, you know how they say men think with their penis, Taylor thinks with their vagina. So they're like trying to talk about how like she makes bad choices, maybe out of love or passion or like whatever is going on. Um, but Macy always holds this like line, I think, where she's not going to turn against like anyone. And I think that that starts to be really true here. But I do think the juxtaposition between this conversation about like what they're thinking about Taylor is interesting because then it's sort of like interedited with Taylor talking to her mom and talking about like all the growth that she's gone through. Like apparently she's been in therapy for these 11 months, possibly, mandated therapy, but either way, she's sort of talking about like what therapy has done for her, that she's taking stock of her life, that it could have been the best thing that happened to her in terms of like understanding that. So, I think she's really like talking about a lot of growth while we have this like other conversation about like she's a liability. Do we need to dump her?
Yes. The next scene, I think, is this when Taylor's with mom in the
Hmm.
car.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a lot of growth that, and I think you mentioned once to me, um, therapy. Shout out to therapy and the therapists out
Woot.
there. That's
That's I'm pro
anyways,
therapy. I'm super happy Taylor's in therapy. Yeah.
both of us, yes, obviously we're biased. Therapy is wonderful. But no, research shows too that it's helpful.
Not just a bias. There's evidence.
Not just a bias. But there does seem to be a difference between how Taylor talked about some of her choices the first episode with how she talks about them the second episode. And the the second episode, I still think that I think that there's some shame there when she talks
Mm.
about that um like to me, I still think that there's some work that she can kind of continue to do to maybe even like show herself some self-compassion in the choices that she's made and the past, and she is trying to grow and learn. um but the first episode, she would share things and she would be like smiling and almost kind of like seemingly like excited about sharing these things. And I'm not saying that she was. I think that that can be sort of a defense mechanism, but uh, but there is a big difference, and it seems like she's done a lot of sort of work in exploring
Yeah,
some of
it's really true. In episode one, the Book of Taylor, um, she was just sort of like, I don't get why people are upset with the swinger scandal that I started. Like, there just seemed to be not only a lack of accountability, but even like a lack of awareness. And
it.
while she doesn't really address it here anymore, yeah, I think what you're saying is probably right. Like maybe she's kind of like recognized her part in some of what's going on with her. And it is super sad when she's talking about like, I don't know that I deserve happiness now. And that's that shame piece of like, oh, now that I've realized that maybe I'm part of the problem, now she's grappling with like, what does that mean?
Yes, yes. And I think that's the piece where she could really work on that, like self-compassion, just being kind to herself. And she does deserve a happy ending.
Yeah. I'm going to have a lot to say about Taylor's mom. In episode one, she tells her mom that she's pregnant, and her mom is just like, "Oh my gosh, you're so stupid." And I'm like, okay, harsh but reasonable given the circumstances. So I didn't pick up on how mom might be necessarily, but mom really starts in this episode. And so, mom, if you're watching, take some notes maybe, or
We love
disregard
you, but
whatever. Yeah. I
fans,
have
but
some ideas. But one of the things I can actually summarize mom's problem in one concept, which is she can't move on from the past, and she's not wanting to let Taylor move on from the past. And so she says when Taylor laments to her the situation, mom's response is, "We shouldn't even be here." It's sort of like this constant regret about things that can't change, and unfortunately, it's not very helpful. There will be more evidence of this as the episode goes on.
yes, because we are here.
We
What's the mom's name? Do we know the mom's name? I think we probably do, but I don't remember.
I knew it last time. Luann, Lauren, Leanne is the mom's name.
Leanne, good L name though. You were close. Yes, Leanne. So, yeah, I think that we are here. We don't need to keep saying that we shouldn't be here. We are here. And so what are we going to do from here? And but you mentioned to me previously this idea that like if she wonders like her friends or other like church members might be watching this, and if she doesn't say something like that, would that appear as if she is endorsing or like that what does that support mean? Like basically saying it's okay to do these things, and there might be some like internal conflict there, which I thought was an interesting point and perspective.
Yeah, it's got to be. We'll see that in this episode. Like, it's got to be tough, especially for the mothers or the maybe the husbands or like other people who are like part of this show because they have to be, but they're not social media people, and they might not feel as comfortable. Yeah, what does it mean to have your religious peers watch your parenting unfold right in front of you? I'm sure it's got to be awkward. So you know, who knows what she's normally like. So the theme of this episode though is Taylor's going to have a baby shower, and she wants all mom talk to go. So they're shopping for the baby shower. They're talking about the baby shower. The Macy and Whitney and whatever her name is,
I love it.
Michaela. Sorry, Michaela. I know you love our show, but I'll learn your name. They're all talking about, are you going to go to the baby shower? The Book of Belonging is baby shower oriented.
If we go to the next scene, which is the some of the ladies are together and Whitney brings up a new brand deal offer that she was presented for a vibrator.
That's right.
A
Yeah.
lucrative offer, $20,000. She just needs to hold it and say, use it.
I'd say this is a vibrator.
Yes, this is a
Yeah,
vibrator. Buy it.
it's such a fascinating scene because they're getting brand deals, they're talking about them, what's the weirdest deal. So it's kind of big news, right? Like they kind of share in some way a brand association, and so it matters. And Whitney's going to do a brand deal for a vibrator. She's considering it. It's been offered to her. And maybe for like another group of women this would be a no-brainer, but for this particular group of women, there's a conversation to be had, right? About like, should we even do this? I want to say, and this isn't a criticism of Mormon culture, but like a very interesting thing that I have seen unfold among members of the church across the internet and all kinds of places is members of the church will ask a question: can we do this? Is this okay? Is this allowed? Can I drink this? Can't you? And so there's this weird sort of like, everybody knows the rules, but like if there's a gray area, there's this like question of like, can we? And I just find that like so fascinating. I think now from this perspective of psychologists, like all these adults are sort of like checking in on like
Because
permission.
what does it mean if you can't? Like if the answer is no, what are the implications of that?
That's a good question. That's interesting. So I would say in the LDS church, obviously there's probably like would happen in any kind of like similar cultural organization where there might be social consequences. Um, they might be asking the broader question of like, is it a sin? And
Mhm.
then there's sort of like a very broad, I guess, do I get into heaven or not, or do I repent, like whatever that means. Um, but maybe there's like a slightly narrower in between where they need the temple recommend. And I don't know if we talked about the temple recommend in the last episode.
I don't think so.
They take pictures in front of the temple, but um, to be a member of the LDS church, there's regular churches and chapels and everybody attends or whatever, but then there's the temples, which, you've probably seen. They're popping up all over. And to go into the temple and sort of participate in the temple, you need to have a temple recommend. And to get a temple recommend, you have to meet with your ecclesiastical leaders, like a bishop, have a worthiness interview, and then you get a temple recommend based on your temple worthiness. And to be worthy of the temple, you have to answer um, like 15 questions that will demonstrate your temple worthiness. So sometimes that question, they're not asking that question here. They're not sort of saying, like, can I keep my temple recommend if I do this? But there is this question of like, does this allow me to go to the temple or not? Sometimes that, I think, is the line that people will like measure by. If I drink Diet Coke, I can go to the temple. If I drink coffee, I cannot.
Interesting. Okay. Huh.
But they're not asking that question. So that's, there's a little cultural tidbit for you, but
That's
they're
very
not
interesting.
saying that.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, and so they're talking about this vibrator. Some of the women look shocked by this. It also opens up the opportunity for them to have a dialogue about sex
Mhm.
and sexual pleasure and a woman's pleasure in this context, a heterosexual relationship, marriage in particular. Layla shares that she has two children. She's divorced, or maybe getting divorced at this point, but like on her way, if not
Still quite
already.
young. She's like 21 or 22, I think. She's
Yes.
one of the younger of the group.
Yep. And she has never had an orgasm.
Hmm.
Um, I think they talk about how they are hoping to like maybe share more about this because of their like the shame and lack of knowledge about sex that exists with women or maybe people in general within the LDS church or you like young people. Um and then Jen Affleck says sex is not just about the guy.
That's right. It's a very sex positive conversation that they go into, right? I think they're sort of saying like it should be all right to do this. It should be all right to use a vibrator for sexual pleasure. And then they kind of go into sort of like those expectations and Layla is like, I've never had an orgasm. And it isn't, I think there's probably like a lot of implications there. She's not saying just sort of like nobody has ever pleasured me. She also sort of says, which might be true, but I don't know. But I think she's also saying whenever she's come close, she herself sort of like fears it a little, which is, really vulnerable of her to share. Just kind of like her relationship with the idea of sexual pleasure is something that she has felt afraid of instead of embracing.
Yeah. I felt some of the conversation felt also a little sad for me. The idea that and you can check me, this is likely my bias, but they're having this conversation which probably feels really progressive. In fact, like later episodes, some of the women even identify as like a progressive Mormon. This is a very progressive conversation, but the idea that sex is not just about the guy is not a progressive concept like across the board. It's just not. I mean, do you agree with that? Like it feels like maybe like in certain cultures, I understand that we're talking like this is a culture where maybe that is a progressive thought, but if we just zoom out in general, it
Right.
feels pretty standard. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Standard. It's not a conservative concept, but it is, but it
true.
should be the standard.
It should be the standard, most definitely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, probably like the most non-progressive concept would be that like no pleasure for anybody. It's about like baby making only or like that sort of thing. So
Yes.
I think it's important that it's basically like stated that sex is not just for the guy because I think whether that's spoken or not, I think that's the experience of a lot of people is that the man's pleasure is
Mhm.
sort of the litmus test of if sex happens or is successful or or whatever.
Well, and I think that, and again, like I am not basing this on research. This is just my personal opinion. I think that there are probably a lot of men out there that would agree with that statement, but they don't practice what they preach. So, like
Right. They
in the
don't
bedroom,
know or
are they doing that? Or is it because this is anecdotal, but I'm sure that there's, which I will go look. I will go look, and next episode I will share if there's research out there. There are a lot of like really progressive men out there, and in this context, like in heterosexual relationships that are would yeah, hands down. Of course, sex isn't just about the guy, but that is not necessarily the woman's perspective when they are in the like having any sort of sexual encounter. So,
yeah. And I mean, I will also speculate because I think there's probably, first of all, everybody's different, and so there's like all kinds of things going on. But I would imagine that in a culture where sex is not talked about, or even like discussing sex is taboo, that that might be what happens out of ignorance sometimes, because like a man's pleasure might be um, easily understood. It's normalized as being central, I think, to the conversation sometimes, a man's arousal, like all of these pieces. One thing that I think might be worth mentioning is in the LDS church, they talk about this, right? I think Layla specifically says is the message is like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then you get married and she says, you're expected to be a porn star. Now, I'll agree that the church teaches the don't do it part, and then they basically sort of like are like, go ahead. But but the porn star thing, I think, comes from just sort of like maybe the man's expectation of like, oh, finally, and then you know, like why isn't this like so easy and sensual and like where's the design? Like there's all these things that nobody's really like talked about or thought about or like worked with or whatever. And so I think what Layla is saying there is this idea that she's supposed to go from like so inhibited to suddenly uninhibited is just like
yes.
a huge jump.
Yes.
And maybe more for women, you know, like probably more for women than men. And I think that that's probably typical. Probably
Yeah.
much more for women than men.
I mean, yeah, there's no no foreplay, if you will. Like we are not like working up to it.
Right. No,
I can't
yeah,
it.
yeah.
That's
I mean, in fact, and I'm not, I mean, I'm sure plenty of people, you know, whatever. I'm always trying to do this line. Like, I want to be fair to the church, but I know that, like, when people are not feeling like great about religion or like great about those messages, they don't even want to hear like sort of a positive view. But I will say that, so, you know, if I'm speaking negatively, I'm always like, is this too negative? Is it not negative enough? Whatever. But in the LDS church,
perspective.
you are
It's
in,
interesting. Yeah, different perspectives.
yeah, but you're encouraged to never like single date until you are like in your early 20s, like post missionary kind of age or whatever. So
You mean
you're
exclusively date one person? Is that what you
no,
mean?
no, no, no. You're not allowed to date at all until you're 16, and then once you're date, double dates only. Like you're like sort of encouraged to
Oh,
never be alone with somebody of the opposite
okay.
gender
I was like,
until you're like really looking for a partner.
oh wow. Wait, okay, so when you're well, what's the difference when you're really looking for a partner? You can then go on single dates?
Yeah. That I don't want to get into it too much, maybe because I'm not sure how relevant it is to the
Yeah.
folks on the show, but I will say that like a huge part of LDS culture is the mission. And
Mhm.
the mission is mandatory for men. Now, not mandatory, like you can do whatever you want, but you know, like the implication is like men must go, women may go.
Mhm.
And so for a long time, you know, like women only went if they didn't get married until they were 19. And then they're like, I'm an old maid. I guess I'll serve a mission. Like, whatever. There's different ways that this is seen. But basically, I guess I would say for a man, it very easily there's this like cutoff point where it's like before your mission, double dates only. After your mission, now you can date for real because now you're sort of like
Can
actually able to get married. Plenty
I
of people. date. Plenty of people like break that rule. It's not one of the hard rules necessarily. It's like one of the encouragements, but people have different like feelings about it.
Interesting. At first I thought you were saying like you were encouraged to go out one on one with like multiple people. I was like, okay, that's
Harkening back to the polygamy days, they're like, get used to
go
groups.
go for it.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so
Well, so they all start talking, and this is a fascinating conversation, is they all start talking about like, would you do it? I would need 30,000. I would need 50. Jen Affleck's like, I would need 1 million. I don't know what they say, right? But Jen Affleck's sort of like, I wouldn't do it. Like for me, I would never do it. And I don't know if she says because it's wrong or if she's I think we'll discover it has a little bit to do with her personal relationship also, but I feel like Jen Affleck is in many ways one of the more adherent members of the church.
Mhm.
And so maybe that has something to do with it, which is then fascinating because they also deem her as like the what do they call her? The one who's like the stripper, or what do they say? The one who's like the most.
They did I write this down? They said that they were talking about sending nudes to their husbands. Maybe they called her like she's like the I no, I don't want to say like but they there was some comment made about how she sends like maybe the most provocative of the nudes to her husband. Um if you were to rate on like a heat scale, she's like high up there in terms of how spicy of a picture she's sending compared to the others. Yeah.
Yes. Sex isn't just about the guy, says Jen. The more you enjoy it, the more they enjoy it. So she's still sort of like, it's good for
Yes.
everyone. Macy, again, who I like, is like, I don't care who it's for. Like, it's for me. Oh, but they
Yeah.
say we know who the real porn star is for their husband. That's Jen Affleck.
Okay.
Jen
That's
Affleck
what
is
I
the
thought
real
they
porn
said,
star.
but I didn't want to say that if that was wrong. But yes. Okay. Yep. But that is also very different than, I mean, that's like with her and her husband. I think it's funny that they're showing each other the nudes that they're showing their spouse because
Yeah.
I would never. So here I am like saying like, oh, they're saying, they wouldn't do this and I have no problem doing that. But I'm like, I would not show my friend, like, look at what I sent my spouse.
I know you're all, oh, it's sad how conservative they are and
Right.
sheltered. And
And
then
I was like,
and
oh,
then
I would
Demi's like,
never.
look at my nudes.
Never would I ever
Yeah.
do that. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that's totally funny. So, good. Sex positive talk. I think they kind of give Whitney enough encouragement to say, like, this is an empowering act. It should be okay to do. They all kind of give it a stamp of approval. I don't know if that's what she's looking for. So, it's good.
Yep.
And good luck to Layla.
Yes. Yes. We hope she has an amazing orgasm.
Yes. I
I
wish
do.
her well.
But sure will. The next scene is Taylor with her parents at Taylor's place.
Taylor's place. I love her seafoam green cabinets. And she's having her parents over to give them some news.
Big news. Big news.
And and the news is that Dakota, who will be the father of the child she's about to bear, is going to move into the home with her. And she has to break this news to her parents because it's going to be hard news for them to hear because they don't want that to happen. I do want to preface, so this is where we really like see Taylor's parents shine, and I'm being sarcastic because Dad comes in and is like, "What's so important? I got pulled away from my job," and so and so he's probably not thrilled to be on TV. Like, whatever, I get that. But it's
Yeah.
just so weird. It does. It goes back to that part where like, okay, well, you're on TV and you are choosing to present this way. Why? And I wonder if it's like people are gonna watch me do this. I have to show that I'm like, I don't know, like gruff and disapproving. I'm not sure.
You know what? I've watched enough Real Housewives to see a plethora of the house husbands in how they perform on the show.
Mm.
And there are some that do it with great ease. And there are others that the way they behave is sort of similarly in that you're like, is this how you choose to like, this is what you're going with? Okay. And I wonder if it just comes from such great Well, two things. If it comes from such great discomfort that they just don't know. They don't know. Like I don't know what to do. This is just the best I got. Um
Sure.
or I do think, because I've heard people say this on the other podcast that I listen to, that there is this phenomenon where you are filmed all the time and you do kind of block it out. Like you stop noticing it. And so we think like, oh, of course, like the camera's in your face. And I'm sure that that is maybe that is a factor, but I think that there are circumstances where you just forget, you kind of forget that they're there, and it just turns into a natural, like generally like organic conversation that would happen if the cameras weren't on.
So what's funny about this conversation to me is she's telling her parents that Dakota is moving in, and I swear to you, the first time I watched this, I just assumed. I think I always assumed Taylor's younger than she is because of her behavior and personality. But I assumed that she lived with her parents and she was telling them Dakota was moving into their home. That reaction they were having would make more sense if he was crashing their home. But he's moving into a grown woman's home who's carrying his child, and they're like, I don't know. I don't think
That's
that's a
what
good
I thought.
idea.
That's exactly what I thought too. Like I think even like because we watched this episode so many times at this point, I think like the first two episodes, I think it took me like a little while to be like, oh, that is not, like she does not live with them. She lives in her own home.
Yeah.
Because yes, if I had that happen and my adult daughter is having a baby and she lives with me and she's like, hey, my partner's moving in today, I'd be like, no, 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 we're going to talk about this. Like, you know, um, but yes, of course not. It's her home.
So she's really not asking them for anything like financially supportive. Like what? Like this is no burden to them. But what they talk about is like marriage is a sacred thing. This is a big LDS thing too, where living in sin maybe or living with a partner that you're not married to is like not. It's not good. A person who wants to be baptized into the LDS church cannot do so if they are living with a partner that they're not married to, for example.
Oh, okay.
So like that's where they're coming from here, but as a psychologist it blows my mind because I think Taylor's making, from a psychologist's point of view, these good points of like, I'm going to have his baby, you want me to do this alone? And what do the parents say? You shouldn't even be in this situation. They cannot
I can't let
grapple
go.
with the reality.
Cannot let go. No, we shouldn't even be here. Dad says something to Dakota, like, is this just what you do? You just like knock up women? Like, she is 8 months pregnant, sir. Like, what we need to just, and also what's sad, Dakota wants to get married and
That's what I was gonna say. Like Dakota's like, please marry me, and Taylor's like, let's take it easy. And then Dad's like, so you just
you just knock him up, don't want to get married and move in, huh?
no, Dakota's like, I'm trying so hard to have her marry me. This is what I'll say. Again, we're gonna have time to criticize Dakota throughout this process, and we will. But
Well,
Dakota is great on camera. He's great with people. He's got so much charisma. The way he handles this is like way better than I think I would do in this situation.
yeah.
Like walks, he's kind of warm. He's like, I really love your daughter, and they're just like not having it.
So I'm curious what you think. You're going to be like, well, you probably will say something like, I'm being nitpicky, and I am. But I still kind of want to hear what you say. So and this could be from my own like anxious attachment I have, but Dakota's trying to convince her parents that, you know, like that he's in it for the right reasons, as they say on The Bachelor. And he said, this is everything I have ever dreamed of. And then he goes, also, I love your daughter. I love her a lot. And I was like, womp womp. Like that was my because if I were Taylor, hands down, I'd be like, that's the second thing. Like that's the next. Okay. And then it's not like and again, probably like again, anxious attachment brain, where it's I love your daughter. I love her a lot. It's not with all my heart and soul. But
You're like, come on, Dakota.
it felt a little bit like I've always wanted to be in a relationship and have a baby. Oh, yeah, and I love her too. I love her a lot, and I don't think that
And
that's
Taylor's the
actually
one I'm doing it with.
I love her. Like, but yeah, anyway, that stuck out to me, and, again, I don't think that's fair. I'm putting that I don't think that's
Sure.
fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a little nitpicky. It seems like at this point, they're actually like, the relationship has its moments, right? Like it's a little rocky. So, like, I'm sure there's this thing about like, I love her so much, but like we're fighting all the time or whatever. Like that, it's probably complicated in that way for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And we will say, and I, this is so complicated. I hate this because Luann, is that her name that we decided? Is it Luann?
Leanne.
Leanne. So Leanne's worried about whether or not Dakota is sober. I have no comment, but obviously, a person in recovery, I can see why a parent is concerned, and it sure does suck because, like, he's in recovery, like what, he's doing his best. I think it's hard when people are just really suspicious of somebody in recovery who's doing well, but it's the reality of the situation.
There's the unknown, you don't know. You worry about your kiddo, even, as an adult even. But I think to say that on camera is really terrible. Like, I mean, I think that to question someone's sobriety is not good, regardless. Unless you have some evidence to support that. Like if you were just speculating, it did not to me, just observing, it didn't seem like I've observed these behaviors and I am worried that he is not sober. It
Right.
was he's moving in? Great. Is he even sober? It just felt like they just are upset about the situation and they're grasping at straws. And I think that that's a real if that is the case, that's a really big accusation to make for someone who's in recovery, but
Totally.
also to say that on camera. So like I go back to like you don't even notice that the camera is there, but I do think like there are again all the reality TV that I watch a lot of arguments that exist about what some and you're sort of breaking the fourth wall there where you're acknowledging the cameras, but it is something that comes up quite frequently where you chose to say this on camera and when you open that up it then opens it up to everyone else to speculate. And that was on you for doing that. And that was like my reaction when
Mm.
she's so
Yeah, fair. This conversation is them talking about how, like, you ought to be married, and Taylor is not ready to be married because she doesn't, she already has another baby daddy, which she says, and just kind of she's being tentative, but she is having the baby. She's having it with Dakota. She wants him to move in for help. Um, Probably not a bad idea for those reasons, but yeah, parents are worried about it. And
yeah.
also just the language of like, you knock up my daughter. I'm like, let's just calm down. This is gonna be a child who's gonna be hearing these messages soon.
Yes.
So then they move into, and I'm just noting this, there I just find so I'm a stay-at-home MILF is the like title on the Mom Talk TikTok that they show, which
Oh, I
is,
missed this. The video that they do, they record
yeah, it's showing like there's some hip hop and they're dancing. It's just showing a Mom Talk video, but the text on it is, I'm a stay-at-home MILF.
the confidence too.
So I know, I'm like, I think other people are supposed to say that about you. You're not supposed to say that about yourself, right? Like that's just a
Yeah.
judgment call. Whatever.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
Mhm.
Taylor goes to meet with Macy. Macy doesn't let me down here.
No.
Macy's concerned because she does not care for Dakota based on behavior she's seen. And she's really like forthcoming. Macy is like, I'm seeing the way he's treating you. I'm seeing the way you were like really worried about being in this relationship and asking for help. And then all of a sudden being like, we're pregnant and we're making it work or whatever. So Macy's worried that this is like a toxic relationship. And she says it's based on relationships she's had.
Yeah.
And she
Yes.
talks specifically about a time when Taylor was somewhere at a party, her ex showed up, not like probably invited by her, just like came to the same party. And
Yeah.
Dakota is texting Taylor, I guess, really awful things, calling her a slut. And Macy's reading it over her shoulder. And so she's just like, Dakota is not it. So she's worried. She's worried about Taylor.
Yes. She said that he's essentially verbally abusive. I mean, I think if you're calling your partner a slut, like that feels verbally abusive. Like that is what that is,
For
right?
any reason, let alone for like your ex is in the same space as you for some reason. Like
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
alarming. Yeah. It's
It is
alarming behavior. And Macy is
um,
alarmed.
yes, as we all are.
Well, so what's great about Macy here, I want to say, is you could argue that the only reason anybody's doing outreach to anyone or whatever is because it's a brand and it's like, is it good for business to be together? Is it not good for business or whatever? I really feel like this is a place where Macy shows that she also cares about things that are outside of the brand. She like cares about Taylor's well-being. She tries to show up as a friend. And she's sort of like encouraging her to keep it together. Now that could be for the brand, right? Like you're going to have the baby shower, mom talk, but she's like, you need to do what's good for you, and I can tell you who is on your side and who's not on your side. And I don't even think that's like unfair to throw people under the bus or to throw Whitney under the bus. Macy's just sort of like, you don't need fake friends. And so I like find it really like endearing, I think.
Yeah. Yes. I think she's very supportive. And I think she demonstrates that throughout the season too, which we
Yeah.
will later.
But that's it. So that's a short video because then we're gonna see after Macy's being her protective friend or whatever, we're gonna see Whitney talk to her mom and sister to get further approval about doing this vibrator deal. And so
Yeah.
she goes to her mom's home to talk to her mom and sister about the deal.
Mom does not think she should do it. She doesn't think it's good to use a vibrator when you're single because she says when you're seeking pleasure, it could get out of hand. No pun intended with a hand. No.
This is such an interesting conversation because, again, it could be edited in any kind of way, but I don't think Whitney presented it super well despite that. But I think she's probably going into this nervous because she probably is anticipating. In fact, the conversation starts with like her little sister is dating a non-member, which is like
Yes.
kind of frowned upon because you can't get married in that temple I mentioned, right? Like all of those things. And she was like, I feel like if I had dated a non-member, it wouldn't have been okay. And her mom gives this really cute answer of like, well, now you know it would have been fine or whatever. But, you know,
No.
the older child experiences the more strict parenting.
Yes. Every first child knows that's not true. I am a first child. That is not true. Mm-mm.
And I'm the youngest. I got away with everything. She's like, well, I got this vibrator deal. And her mom's like, okay. And her sister's like, is that on brand for you? So, like, maybe that's real concern. I can't tell where sister's at with all of this. Well, why would you consider that? And she goes, for the money, which I do not think, I think is hilarious, but not, not, is like exactly what mom's worried about. It's like, I'm going to sell my soul for filthy lucre. Like, that's her. Like, she's literally, I'm going to compromise all my standards for the cash. Hilarious, upsetting to mom.
Yes. Yes. Well, wait, going back real quick to the sister, and I don't think that this was how the sister said it. I think that she really was like appeared to come from a place, a very genuine place in asking, is
It's
this
a
it's consistent with what, you were hoping to showcase on your social media. But I also think that could easily be a very passive aggressive question. Is this on brand for you? I don't think this is on brand. Like, but it was not. But
sure.
I wondered for a quick second, like, was this like almost like a covert passive way of saying don't do it from the sister. But I don't actually think that.
Right, but I guess my question is the motivation that the sister is like, you have this Mormon audience or like this or that, or like how does this reflect? Or is it from a place of like you shouldn't do that because there's something wrong with it, which I didn't pick up on that, right? But who knows? So then Whitney's next sentence to her mom is like, "Don't you think it's empowering?" Now, I don't know if there was more between that was cut out, but I thought that was very she's like, "Don't you think it's empowering?" And I think mom maybe could have used like some context around why that might be true.
They start talking about Whitney shares that her wedding night was a horror movie, then she changes it to a comedy.
Maybe not a horror movie, a comedy.
So it is along the lines of what you said, where maybe there's this expectation of abstinence and really like limited, one-on-one time together. And then
No
this sort of
experimentation, maybe, or very little.
yes, and then there's expectation of just go for it. So yeah, if you like that would be really rough. And so Whitney says to her mom something along the lines of you should have talked to us about this,
Hmm. Yeah.
about sex, so we would have known more.
Well, and so what she does share, I think, is what I said before is, the church really does teach, like, just don't do it. And that's kind of the only lesson or sex education that you're given. But not only that, there are specific sort of like talks that have been given by church leaders over the years that tell young women that you need to safeguard the chastity of the young men. The way you dress, the way that you present yourself, like don't tempt them. There's like so much responsibility put on the women of the church and in society in general, right? But about
And
like the lust of men. And it's just so magnified, I think, in that environment.
which is very unfair to women.
Mm-hmm.
That's not great. Even going back to the conversation about the talk about sex, the education about sex, there was no sex education in school. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious what, and you do not have to share. I will share my parent talk with my mom about sex, which included a one-on-one girls' night to a pizza restaurant, which I was so in the fifth grade. I was like, this is awesome. My mom is taking just me, none of my siblings, out to pizza. We had pizza, laughs. We got in the car. She handed me a book and said, read this on at your read this on your own. And ask me if you have questions. And I saw the cover and I was like, oh, okay. And then we had a very awkward drive home, probably in silence. She might have played some Christian music. I don't know. And then I never to be spoken of again. I do not even know what happened to that book. I definitely read it. And I don't think it taught me very much, to be quite honest. I don't know what book. I can't even bring myself to ask my mother, honestly. And I hope to have a very different dialogue with my kiddo down the road. That is not an uncommon experience that I think surpasses even the LDS community, where maybe parents have not always done the best job at talking about something that feels really uncomfortable, like sex.
I mean, I think it's a little bit in her mom's response. She implies that masturbation maybe isn't okay or something, and then she sort of implies when you're seeking pleasure, it can get out of hand. I think that that feels relevant that there's a fear that if you talk about a thing, that it will encourage it in some way. And so I think there's just this fear of like if we don't talk about it and they don't know about it and I don't introduce ideas to them, then that is better or safer. I don't know if it means they'll be. I don't know. It seems like there's a huge fear in terms of what will happen if you talk about it. And for sure, one of the fears is I can't imply that I'm giving any kind of permission to do so. And Whitney says in this, like this is true. This is a Book of Mormon scripture that says sex or adultery or fornication. I don't know how it sort of like says it specifically, but it's been repeated, over hundreds of years, is next to murder in sin. So the implication of like doing sex wrong, right? Like outside of the bonds of marriage is next to murder in its gravity. So that's heavy. That's like heavy stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, like talk about shame, like you are bad, like because murdering someone is
It's
bad.
bad. It is
It's bad.
bad.
And so if it's close to that, then it must be pretty dang bad to have sex. The idea of, though, anything that you're not allowed to do, what is the term? Is it psychological reactance that you have where it's like, if I'm told I can't have something, I want it more, it becomes prize. And this
Mhm.
happens with food. I mean, like if you see like yo-yo dieters, if they are told versus someone that maybe, like there's no good or bad food. I can eat whatever I want. There are no like consequences to that. Um, so those are the people that like will go to a fast food restaurant, like eat until they're full, and then they just leave whatever's left. Versus if someone's like, I know I shouldn't have this, I need to get it out of my system. So I already started, I already messed
Mm.
up. Let's do as much as we can today, and I will start over tomorrow. And then it can turn into this cycle. And I think the same thing can happen in these types of situations with sex or with porn or with lots of things that I'm not supposed to do it. So then when you kind of like dip your toe, well, I might as well because I blew it today and I might as well just do as much and then I will be better. I'm not going to do it again. And then it really kind of puts it on this pedestal where I think if you were to just say it's not, it's not off limits entirely, but then also, like research on sex education is that teaching about sex and safe sex, research shows it decreases the chances of teen pregnancy and STIs. And I mean, there are a lot of positive outcomes from teaching about this, but you think of like the parent who's like, hey kid, here are these condoms, like safe sex. And I do think that other people might look and like, you're just telling your kid you can go have sex and you're helping them do it. And I think that that's sort of that's sort of what you're describing, that maybe they might think.
Yeah, that all or nothing mentality I think hits really hard because once you've basically like broken your perfect image of yourself or like whatever that is. Now it's what's fascinating I think is like the main tenet of Christianity is like that there is forgiveness for sins because that's the whole point of it, right? And yet in behavior there's something else that goes on, right? And so there's, or especially in LDS culture, I think it's different in a lot of I think it's different in terms of your relationship with maybe in a culture where you're told it's next to murder, there's something else that happens. But there, I think what will happen is people might have sex once or something, and then they're like, I'm ruined. And in fact, this is really sad, but I think a lot of LDS people from my generation could tell you that they had a literal lesson where maybe a piece of chocolate or a flower was like passed around a room and everybody handled it, and then when it came back it was all mangled and gross and messed up, and they're like, and that's you, that's your body, that's what's happened if you like let every, whatever. And it's awful.
Oh,
Whereas a much
man.
better lesson would be to pass around $100 bill and it'd be like, do what you want with that. It's still going to be $100 when you get it back. Like the
Yeah.
object lesson that's sort of like really communicated culturally has been quite shaming. Um, despite despite the belief in the atonement of Jesus as a savior, right? So it's complicated.
Do you remember? I think this might have been in our cognitive processing class. I think the
Dr.
study,
Pickle.
Dr. Pickle, yes. Just love that class. The study where there was like kids where they had to sit at a table with like a bowl of marshmallows and they weren't allowed to touch them and they were like licking the table. That might have not been that class, but do you remember what the
That
context
study.
of that?
The study is about like your ability to inhibit your kind of like impulses or desires or whatever, and they connected the person who could sit and look at the marshmallows and not take a taste was likely to be like successful in like all these ways, right? Like they had more self-control. But I will say there's been follow-up studies on that that showed that it was people who experienced more scarcity, children who experienced more scarcity were less likely to inhibit control. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying. Like a poor person will spend their tax return on a television instead of investing it because they're just like, I never get money. And so I get, I get the thing.
I get it. Yes. And with food, a lot of kiddos that turn into adults who where they grew up with food scarcity. I will see people who maybe then will describe like maybe binge eating when they were younger, when they were able, I had access to this and I couldn't get it any time else. And so you just had to eat as much as you could because you didn't know when you were going to get it again. But you can kind of simulate those situations based on the circumstances of if you don't have access to something, that dynamic can occur. I do want to say though that I know we're sort of zooming in on this culture and their views, but it is not the female's responsibility to keep the male from his
From lust.
protect him from yes.
Yeah, in fact, despite that message being spread far and wide in a lot of cultures, I would point out, I can't point to the scripture because, like, whatever, but he says, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. And so, what he's saying is, if you lust after a woman, pull your own eyeball out. Don't tell her to cover up. That's
Don't
what
tell her to cover
Jesus
up.
said.
Yes.
So, I don't know why his followers are like, could you cover up?
It's your fault.
Mind
Yes.
yourself before
Mind
you ask her
yourself.
to
You can't
cover up.
handle it.
Yeah, if you can't handle it, the answer is pluck your eye out. And yet somehow, it's like turned into the responsibility of women to like cover their bodies.
I think also that probably goes back to Adam and Eve too. Eve tempted. Which didn't you say? What did you say? Did you tell me? Did we talk about this? You
We did, yeah, yeah. There is this long tradition of like Eve tempted
tempted.
Adam and sexual things happened or whatever. But interestingly enough, the LDS Church actually does not think that that's what happened, and it puts Eve in this place of like she made the right decision. She was aware that you couldn't keep both commandments. You couldn't sort of like live forever in the garden but also never have children. It was one or the other.
Yeah.
And so there's this like elevation of Eve was like the one who was like, "Listen, buddy, we got to choose one of these. They're contrary to each other."
Yeah.
Even though like we see that it doesn't seem to move the overall cultural needle of blaming women for everything.
It's blaming women for everything. That's interesting though. That's
Whitney's going to do the empowering thing, whether her mom likes it or not, it sounds like. And her mom is not going to love it, but, she's parenting on television. She's doing her best, keeping her cool.
yep. Yep. Is that the end of the
No.
ep- no.
So there's a brief.
Oh
So
yeah.
Whitney and Dakota get together. There's a little more because we got to get to the baby shower. It's all about the baby shower.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Okay, I need to
So
change up my
there's a little with Dakota and Taylor where Dakota's like, Macy hates me and she's never gonna like me or whatever. She does this thing which, if that were true and fair, that's fine. But it is this thing where it's like, oh, your girlfriend who's actually concerned about your safety because of like the actual terrible things I've done and said doesn't like me, so you shouldn't trust her. Like, I'm not loving that dynamic. Macy cares about Taylor. Dakota probably does too, but he's just like, Macy doesn't like me. She's got a problem that she doesn't like me. So they have that conversation.
She doesn't like our Instagram or whatever pictures. That was
That's
it.
Oh, that's right. It was
She's
the
petty.
absence of her liking our Instagram figure pictures.
I like it. The nuances of friendship in the age of social media. Oh, that person, that was a burn because they didn't like it. And they like everything. So I know that they did that on purpose.
The
And
idea that anyone is tracking who does not like something is so bizarre to me. Apparently it's normal, but I'm it's blows my mind.
it's sort of like when you're in a romantic relationship and like I think this probably happens in couples counseling a lot where you like bring something to your therapist and you're like this happened and to you it feels like a really big deal because you guys live together and you are used to the slight subtle changes in your partner's nonverbals and it's like I asked them to take out the trash and this was their response. Well, like that sounds really insignificant. Did they take out the trash? Yes, they did that. But they made that face, and so it's like I feel like when you know those behaviors so well that then you can be like, well, you can comment on the intention. I know you weren't happy about it. And so then it comes across as really trivial, I think at times. That's sort of what it felt like. Like he probably wasn't wrong. Like Macy probably doesn't like the photos because she doesn't like Dakota and she's not supporting their relationship. And so, but in his retelling of that, it's comes across really like, come on.
You're totally right. I know. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, it's weird to me that he would notice. And somebody who arbitrarily doesn't like things and was accused of that, that would seem super bad. But he's actually, yeah, he's probably right. He's picking up on the right vibe, which is Macy doesn't like him.
She doesn't like him. She
Yeah.
said it earlier. We know. The audience
Yeah.
knows. Yes. But Taylor says that, yeah, Macy is one of the few people that she confides in. And so that friendship means something.
Yeah. Which is going to be a problem for Dakota. So then there's this quick scene with Layla and Whitney where Whitney does some more sowing of her discord of saying like I'm not going to Whitney's baby shower because like I don't like her. I'm not into it. I'm not going to do it. We're not friends. So she really like decides, right, that she's just not going to want to include Taylor. And I think she really hopes that all the women will like back her up, but they're kind of just listening for now.
You're like, yeah,
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 that sounds really hard. I'm going to go to her baby shower, is kind of the message there.
yes. They all go. They all want to go or go.
Yeah, they're all going to go. Well, because they're on the show together. Like, of course you're going to go. Like, we're doing a show. Let's all, whatever. Anyway, they have this conversation while they sit in like some kind of underground salt cavern that has been built for wealthy people to be around salt or whatever. I just find it so bizarre. I'd go for free. Give me a ticket. I'll go check it out. But uh weird to me.
Wait, I have to say real quick because this was not on this. They showed this same room. I'm assuming they have a bunch of these places, but I'm pretty sure because it looked exactly the same with the same sad beach chairs. And they showed this on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and one of the housewives asked the staff there for a drink, like a tea, and they were like, "Just don't spill it," which I thought was really funny.
We can't get more salt.
I just had to share that. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's
I
great.
digress.
Whatever. It's weird. The final scene of the episode is the baby shower. Everybody's showing up. They're looking good because they know they're on TV together. Everybody's there except for Whitney. It's noticed right away. And Layla has to be the like deliverer of like, yeah, she doesn't want to be your friend. She told me right
You can
before.
see in her body language, like her shoulders are kind of like coming in. She's like, she's
She
not.
doesn't want to. She doesn't want to say it.
Mm-mm. Who would want to be the
No.
best?
And yeah, again, it's that sort of like somebody doesn't show up to your party, that might feel a certain way. Somebody who you're doing a television show with, who's the other queen bee, doesn't show up to your party. That's a gauntlet thrown down, I think, is what they're feeling.
Yes. And this was Leanne's time to shine. This was her moment. She was ready. I feel like and again, we love you, Leanne. But I do feel like she's like, what role does she have other than saying we shouldn't be here? It's like, like
Why are we
now's
having
my
this shower?
now's my chance. I'm calling Whitney. Do they even know each other? I mean, Whitney doesn't have her phone number. That seems pretty clear because she didn't clearly know who was calling her.
Funny.
Uh, but
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I know some of my friends' mothers, but
yeah, I
not
do.
well. I mean, if your mom called me, she'd have to like remind me who she was real quick, but I would, I've spoken. We've spoken. What's
Yes.
your mom's name? I'm just kidding. I would know. She would have
Yes.
to say
Yeah.
I'm Sean's mom, and I'd be like, yes.
Yes, that's it. But but she I thought Whitney handled that really well. What do you think?
Oh, totally. Yes. Because even though, like, I'm not totally vibing with Whitney in this episode here, her mom calls in Whitney is just like, I think that's a conversation between me and Taylor, which is like totally true. So weird.
Okay, I'm gonna make this comparison and I'm curious what you think. The way Leanne had that conversation with Whitney felt very a la episode one, how Taylor talked about her behaviors to other people, where there's this like weird smile, and it's like you're not, are you really worried? Like you're like kind of smiling, where are you, Whitney? Like it's um like you know that it's drama. That's sort of what where Taylor in the first episode was talking about things where there was this awareness of its drama and it's kind of like like
It must just excite them on some level.
yes, where the second episode Taylor obviously doesn't really talk about things in that same with that same energy, but Luann, look at me. Leanne has that energy. I felt like when she was talking to Whitney, where it was
Totally.
very I was cringing. I cringed a little bit.
I was just calling because I noticed you weren't here. We all noticed. The producers noticed. Everybody noticed.
Where are you?
You didn't come to the baby shower. And back to the theme of the whole show, will mom talk stay together? This is
Please do.
central to that question.
I mean, and what happens if they don't? We're all worried.
Yes. Yeah, what's going to happen to the brand?
Mm.
Seems like Whitney's still getting her brand deals, so she's got it made. So I do think this sets up, like classic sitcom trauma, will they, won't they, right? So now it's like, is Whitney gonna make up with Taylor? And that's the whole question of Mom Talk, because everybody else is there. Will Mom
Yes.
Talk stay together? Wouldn't even be a question if Whitney had come to the baby shower. The answer to the question would be like, they're together.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
All right.
So
We did it
we did it. We finished episode 2.
again.
I think what we're going to do for our third episode of our podcast, we are going to group the next couple of episodes together. They are not as eventful, in our opinion, as the first two, and then the last couple of episodes. So I think we're going to do maybe combine episode 3 and 4, and maybe 5, but definitely 3 and 4. So
Yeah, the Book of Saints and Sinners, the Book of Truth coming at you. It's going to get exciting. I know I keep want to be saying like no offense, but I guess I'm just saying offensive things. I don't find them as funny as I would like. I find that they're making a lot of jokes. They're saying they're laughing, but I'm not finding it totally clever. So I'm hoping honestly for just a slightly more stimulation in the cleverness department.
It's it's not very funny. They're not funny, but I am entertained so far,
Good,
at least at this point in the show.
good.
I
All
agree.
right. We'll tune in next time and we'll continue to give our thoughts on all of this nonsense.